Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them,
"Sit here while I go over there and pray."
He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them,
"My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me."
Going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed,
"My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will."
Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping.
"Could you men not keep watch with me for 1 hour?
He asked Peter.
Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak."
He went away a second time and prayed,
"My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done."
When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said to them,
"Are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour is near, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer."
While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd, armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them.
"The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him."
Going at once to Jesus, Judas said,
"Greetings, Rabbi,"
and kissed him. Jesus replied,
"Friend, do what you came for."
Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. With that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear.
"Put your sword back in its place,"
Jesus said to him,
"for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the Scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way?"
At that time, Jesus said to the crowd,
"Am I leading a rebellion that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you did not arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled."
Then all the disciples deserted him and fled.
They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples,
"Sit here while I pray."
He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled.
"My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death,"
He said to them.
"Stay here and keep watch."
Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him.
"Abba, Father,"
He said,
"everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will."
Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping.
"Simon,"
He said to Peter,
"are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak."
Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the 3rd time, he said to them,
"Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer."
Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them.
The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard.
Going at once to Jesus, Judas said,
Rabbi,
and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear.
Am I leading a rebellion,
Said Jesus,
that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the Scriptures must be fulfilled.
Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man, wearing nothing but a linen garment, was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind.
Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them,
Pray that you will not fall into temptation.
He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and prayed,
Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done.
An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow.
Why are you sleeping?
He asked them.
Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation.
While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him,
Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?
When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said,
Lord, should we strike with our swords?
And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered,
No more of this.
And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him,
Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour, when darkness reigns.
Chapter 18. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them,
Who is it you want?
Jesus of Nazareth.
They replied,
I am he.
Jesus said, and Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them,
Who is it you want?
And they said,
Jesus of Nazareth.
I told you that I am he.
Jesus answered,
If you are looking for me, then let these men go.
This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled.
I have not lost one of those you gave me.
Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter,
Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?
Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus.
Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus, so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared,
This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.
Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus,
Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?
But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him,
I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us, if you are the Christ, the Son of God.
Yes, it is as you say.
Jesus replied,
But I say to all of you, in the future you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his clothes and said,
He has spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?
He is worthy of death.
They answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said,
Prophesy to us, Christ. Who hit you?
Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him.
You also were with Jesus of Galilee,
She said. But he denied it before them all.
I don't know what you're talking about,
He said. Then he went out to the gateway where another girl saw him and said to the people there,
This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth.
He denied it again with an oath.
I don't know the man.
After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said,
Surely you're one of them, for your accent gives you away.
Then he began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them.
I don't know the man.
Immediately, a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken.
Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times.
And he went outside and wept bitterly. Chapter 27. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor.
Then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. But when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said,
This man was with him.
But he denied it.
Woman, I don't know him,
he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said,
You also are one of them.
Man, I am not,
Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted,
Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean.
Peter replied,
Man, I don't know what you're talking about.
Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him.
Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times.
And he went outside and wept bitterly. The men who were guarding Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded,
Prophesy! Who hit you?
And they said many other insulting things to him. At daybreak, the council of the elders of the people, both the chief priests and teachers of the law, met together, and Jesus was led before them.
If you are the Christ,
they said,
tell us.
Jesus answered,
If I tell you, you will not believe me. And if I asked you, you would not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the mighty God.
They all asked,
Are you then the Son of God?
He replied,
You are right in saying I am.
Then they said,
Why do we need any more testimony? We have heard it from his own lips.
They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus, so that they could put him to death. But they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him.
We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another, not made by man.
Yet even then their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus,
Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?
But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again the high priest asked him,
Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?
I am,
said Jesus.
And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, and coming on the clouds of heaven.
The high priest tore his clothes.
Why do we need any more witnesses?
He asked.
You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?
They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said,
Prophesy!
And the guards took him and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him.
You also were with that Nazarene, Jesus,
she said. But he denied it.
I don't know or understand what you're talking about,
he said, and went out into the entryway. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around,
This fellow is one of them.
Again he denied it. After a little while, those standing near said to Peter,
Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean.
He began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them,
I don't know this man you're talking about.
Immediately the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him.
Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times.
And he broke down and wept.
They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it would be good if one man died for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the girl on duty there, and brought Peter in.
You are not one of his disciples, are you?
The girl at the door asked Peter. He replied,
I am not.
It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching.
I have spoken openly to the world,
Jesus replied.
I always taught in synagogues or at the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said.
When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby struck him in the face.
Is this the way you answer the high priest?
He demanded.
If I said something wrong,
Jesus replied,
testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?
Then Annas sent him, still bound, to Caiaphas the high priest. As Simon Peter stood warming himself, he was asked,
You are not one of his disciples, are you?
He denied it, saying,
I am not.
One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him.
Didn't I see you with him in the olive grove?
Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment, a rooster began to crow.